record this. Okay, so I hope okay na yung paper ninyo sa introduction, and then sa research methodology you have already started with the different subsections. So again, the title class is called methodology, and then the first subsection for this one is the research design. I hope by now you have identified already what research design are you going to use in your study. I believe yung iba sa inyo magkwa-qualitative, yung iba quantitative, and then I don't know if you have mixed method. However, it's not just about quanti and quali. You also have to be specific, ha? So we are done with this already. So most likely, wait lang, katulungin mo. Most likely, we are going to use these types. Ano yun? Dami kasi. Ayan. So under sa quantitative research, you may choose between descriptive and experimental. And sa descriptive, you also have to be specific, ha, based on the SOP ninyo. So if you have like a question about, like, is there a significant difference? Pwede yan siyang quantitative, descriptive, comparative. But most of the time kasi yung mga research na nakikita ko nowadays is asking about is there a significant association or is there a significant relationship? So bulk of the research papers I receive nowadays are actually quantitative, descriptive, correlational. I think I passed through with the qualitative. If ever merong mag-quali sa inyo, ha, most of the qualitative research here in the school is phenomenological. So it's called qualitative phenomenological study. And your aim here again is to seek or explore the experiences of your participants to a certain phenomenon or situation. Now, since we are in the medical field, I am expecting that some of you will be doing experimental research design. And as just like the descriptive research design, we will also have to be specific. So most likely, we are aiming to have as much as possible to do a true experimental research design. And then again, you have to be specific, ha, if you are doing a pre or a post test, a Solomon 4 group design, or a post test only control group. Kasi ito yung mostly unang tinatanong ng panelists sa inyo during the defense. What is the research design of your study? Okay? So I hope everyone is knowledgeable, ha, kasi hindi pwedeng ang leader lang yung sasagot. Your grade from your advisor will be individual, but a bulk of your grade for the finals will be coming from your grade as a proposal defense, and that will be per group. So like if the panelist will call someone and ask him or her a question, if ever that someone cannot answer the question, automatic that will be a deduction to the whole group. So you will be affected. So as much as possible, everyone should be knowledgeable with your paper, especially what type of research design are you going to use, and you should be able to explain what is that research design specifically. Okay? You have to describe it. Now, ang next niyan is the research local. You may include a map for the research local, but just place the map in the appendices. That will be on the last part of the paper. You don't have to include the map under the research local talaga. Ang ilalagay nyo lang doon is the specific venue or area where you are going to conduct your study. If you are going to do an experimental research, you have to identify where are you going to do the experiment. Example, it will be in the medtech laboratory in GSD-MSFI. So you have to describe where is that specifically. And then again, the map may just be placed in the appendices. Now, if you have materials sa experimental research, like you're going to obtain your plant material, that can be included also in the research local. You have to be specific. Where are you going to get your plant material. And then again, since this is research, we have to, as much as possible, get rid of sources ng variations or bias. So sa plant material class, hindi acceptable na you are going to place there that you will just buy the plant material in a supermarket, hypermarket, or yung public market natin. Okay, sa grocery, hindi yun siya pwede. We have to consider variations in the genetic material of the plant and the environment. So what do I mean? You have to get that plant for the whole duration of your research in one area only. So example, your plant material is malunggay, it has to be one area only. So you have to identify a certain area here or anywhere malapit lang but can supply you a lot of malunggay until the end of your research. So this malunggay is not really like isang puno lang talaga, no, kasi makalbo ang inyong malunggay, but isang area sila, so they share the same soil, ganon. Okay, para makontrol natin yung variation, kasi kapag ibang place, ibang environment yun siya, ibang soil, pwede siyang magkaiba yung phytochemical constituent of the plant because of the environmental factors, and that will lead to variations also of the result of your study. Okay, you have to consider that for the experimental research. Okay, however, for descriptive and qualitative research, you may only have one research local. Like, where are you going to do your survey, or where are your respondents located? You may place that one in the research local. Now, in the sampling technique, do not separate any more respondents of the study and the sampling technique. Isahin na natin silang lahat sa sampling technique, ha? So, ang pagkasulat nyo ng sampling technique class, you start with identifying who are your respondents or participants in the study, okay? Or the subjects of your study. You have to be specific with their characteristics also. So you have to clearly identify them at the start, okay? And then if you know the population, you may also include the population, and you may also include detail on how you are going to compute for the sample size. Okay, so like if you're going to use the Sloven's formula, or you're going to use the Rouse of software, again, in computing the sample size. Then after that, after knowing the sample size, that is where you identify what specific sampling technique are you going to utilize in choosing or selecting your samples, okay, to be included in your study. Okay, so ayan, very important itong sampling technique kasi most of the time we don't do population study. So meaning we don't really include all the members of the population to be our respondents or our participants. So we only get a representative from that certain population, and that is what we call sample. And we really have to be specific on how we are going to identify the samples that we are going to take from the population. So last time I ended with a probability sampling, wherein you are going to give equal chance to all the members of the population to be selected, chosen, or included in your study. Okay, so especially for experimental research, this is very important kasi when you say probability sampling, this is where the findings are considered valid, and we can use the findings to make inferences or generalizations for the characteristics of our populations. Okay? Kasi natatanggal natin yung bias when we do probability sampling. However, if it is inevitable, non-probability sampling naman is still acceptable. It's just that we cannot really call it the best representative for our populations, since we are not giving equal chance to all the members of the populations to be selected or included in our study. So in the probability sampling, you may do one of the following ha, or actually pwede din namang combination. But you can do simple random sampling. I hope naintindihan nyo na when you do simple random sampling, you have your population, you have the names of your population, and then you may write their names in a paper, or you may just assign numbers to them, and then yung usual na ginagamit natin, yung bunot-bunot, that's the lottery method. Okay? Bunot-bunot lang siya. Pero if that will be very sa inyo, no, matrabaho, you may utilize softwares like Wheel of Names, okay? Kasi random picker din yon siya. So, pwede din gamitin as a form or a method to do random sampling. Or you may just, have the table of random numbers wherein the names of the participants are being represented by assigned numbers, and then mauuwi pa rin naman siya actually sa like bunot-bunot or yung software na ginagamit natin yun. Kung anong mapipick na name or na number, yun yung example, bibigyan nyo ng inyong survey questionnaire, or sila yung i-interview natin in our research. Okay? But if, for example, the population of your study is like very broad, no, masyadong marami, million, random sampling will be very difficult. So that is the reason why we have other techniques that are still considered probability sampling. So we have here systematic sampling with random start, wherein it's just like random sampling na that you will assign numbers to your participants. Okay? Pero may specific interval ka. So example, meron kang ganito. Yan yung mga participants mo, they are represented by numbers. And then you may identify interval, tapos magsa-start ka randomly. But for example, I want to start at 1. So number 1 will automatically be included in my study. Tapos yung sinasabi kong interval, yung magka-count ka. Example, my interval is 3. So this is 1, 2, 3. This participant here is also included. 1, 2, 3. Another participant here is included. Okay, so yan yung systematic sampling. It is called systematic because we are following a specific interval, but we are going to start randomly. Actually, you have the choice whether you want to start at number 2. So number 2 automatically gets included in your study. But again, the interval is like constant. Okay, so all the numbers there that will be picked when you count using your interval will be included or selected in your research. Okay? But for stratified and cluster sampling, I hope naintindihan din ito kasi they are almost the same. When I say they are almost the same, they are the same in terms paggrupo natin with our participants. I-group natin sila. But what is their difference? Sa stratified sampling class, you will be grouping them into homogeneous group. Okay? Homogeneous group ito. What do you mean by homogeneous group? Homo means one, right? Meaning you will be grouping them in a specific characteristic. Example, isang grupo lahat ng babae, isang grupo lahat ng lalaki. Okay? So they are homogeneous, meaning walang class masasali doon sa grupo ng mga lalaki na babae. Homogeneous sila. Pwede mo din silang i-group. Isang grupo yung mga bata, isang grupo yung matatanda. Or you will just set specific age range. But nevertheless, isang grupo sila. Okay? So, yung grupo nila is homogeneous. Okay? And then from there, from the homogeneous groups, you will be picking the participants. So, randomly pa rin. So, babalik ka pa rin sa simple random sampling. Okay? So, all the groups will be properly represented. Example, 2 grupo lang ang ginawa mo, babae and lalaki. Tapos kailangan mo ng 100 participants. So pwede mo siyang i-50-50. 50% na lalaki, 50% na babae. Okay? So 50 sa mga babae, no? Pwede kang mag-random sampling dyan. Okay? And ganun din yung gagawin mo sa mga lalaki. That is stratified sampling. Pero kasi, yung cluster sampling, we are grouping them heterogeneously. So, we don't really consider example like hindi sa isang grupo, hindi lahat babae, hindi lahat lalaki. Heterogeneous. But they are still members of the population. Most of the time, when we do cluster sampling, we group them according to their geographical location. Example, yung study last time na ang kanilang respondents or residents of General Santos City. But what they did was they group the participants in clusters in terms of the barangays where they live. Okay, so one cluster, example, yung Barangay Labangal, one cluster yung Barangay Apopong, and so on. Okay, and then unlike the stratified sampling kasi na you will have representative from each group, no? Yung sa cluster sampling kasi, kung ano yung group or ano yung cluster na ma-choose mo randomly, pwedeng balik ka doon sa lottery method, sila lahat magiging participants mo. So example, nag-pick ka, pag lottery method mo, ang nakuha mo is Barangay Labangal only. So lahat ng members ng Barangay Labangal, sila na yung mapipili. That's how we do the cluster sampling. So wala kang representative from Kalumpang, from Langgao, wala na yun sila. Hindi siya kagaya sa stratified sampling. Okay? Do you have questions or clarification? But wait, give me a minute. I'll just plug this one. Okay, so class, you really have to know this by heart also, ha, kasi this will be asked pa rin sa inyo during the defense. You will be asked what sampling technique are you going to use, and you have to explain also how are you going to do, example, the cluster sampling or the stratified sampling. So I hope you are listening, and I hope naintindihan niyo yun. If you have questions, you may ask me, ha. Okay, now let's have the non-probability sampling techniques. Again, ulitin ko, when you say non-probability sampling technique, we don't give equal chance to be to all the members of the population to be included in our study. Okay, so what are the examples of probability sampling? We have here accidental or convenient sampling, wherein the selection of the participants are actually based on the convenience of the researcher. Okay? Sa inyong convenience. So merong gumamit nito last time when they interviewed, nag-interview ba sila? Hindi sila nag-interview. They have their questionnaire. So their study was descriptive correlational. But their respondents were medical laboratory medical technologists working in the hospitals in General Santos City. So it had become convenient sampling because they just went in the different hospitals. They just scheduled, example ngayon na araw, pumunta silang doctors. So kung sino yung nandun na naka-duty sa laboratory during that time, yun lang yung nakasagot sa questionnaire nila. So hindi siya equal chance, ha, kasi yung hindi naka-duty nung araw na pumunta sila, wala na silang chance na makasagot sa questionnaire ninyo. And it was convenient sampling because it was the choice it was at the convenience of the researcher to go there in the hospital and give the questionnaire to the participants or the respondents. Yung mga ginagawa din sa mall, di ba maraming nagsisurvey sa mall na naglalakad ka lang, bigla kang papasagutin ng questionnaire ng survey. It is actually a form of a convenience sampling. Kasi it's actually by chance wherein they just go there in the mall and then accidentally pumunta ka doon and then dumaan ka sa harapan nila and you were asked to answer the survey form. Okay? So convenient sampling ang tawag natin dyan. So you may also do snowballing or network sampling. Ito actually they are almost the same wherein if you really want to have a lot of respondents in your study, you may ask one of your participants kung meron pa ba silang kakilala. Example, naghahanap kayo ng mga medical technologists working in a standalone laboratory. So mag-ask kayo sa kanila na meron pa ba silang kakilala na nag-work din sa kagaya ng standalone na laboratory. And then parang naging networking na siya para you may contact them directly. Okay? So yan yung snowballing or actually network sampling, they are almost the same. Okay? Questions or clarifications? Wala? Sige. So, ito naman, purposive or deliberate judgment. Ito mostly yung ginagamit ng mga qualitative research, especially phenomenological research, no? Kasi, when you say purposive, you really have a purpose, syempre, no? Meron ka talagang target participant. So, this is where this is when the researchers set specific criteria on who are going to be included in their research. Okay, so like my respondents will be medical technologists, but I want them na ganito yung characteristic nila. Yung nagtrabaho sa lab ng more than 10 years na, naka-work sila sa ganitong area sa laboratory. So merong mga specific na mga criteria kang sinusulat dyan and kailangan masatisfy nila yung criteria na yun before sila ma-include sa study mo. So syempre, kung hindi nila na-satisfy yung criteria na hinihingi mo, wala na silang chance to be included in your research. Now, if you're going to use purposive sampling, okay, under the sampling technique, you also have to include the specific criteria that you are looking. Okay? Lagay niyo doon purposive sampling. Explain niyo what purposive sampling is. And after that, will be the specific criteria that you are looking for your respondents. Okay, I hope that is clear. Kasi pag sinulat niyo itong purposive sampling doon sa research ninyo, ang next question yan, what are your criteria? Criteria sa pag-select ng study. So kailangan meron. Kasi paano siya naging purposive kung wala ka naman pala criteria? So everybody should know that ha, basi pangutanon mo niya. Wala mo kabaloon sa inyong criteria tapos nag-purposive sampling mo. So the criteria should be unique ha. Take note of the word unique. Unique dapat yung criteria ninyo. Kaya mo siya hinahanap. Now sa experimental studies, actually, pwede kayong gumamit ng purposive sampling, especially doon sa plant materials, if you are going to use plant materials. Kasi sa plant materials class, meron tayong criteria, diba? Meron tayong number 1, specific plant, and then at the same time, you also have specific plant part. Okay? And sa plant part na yan, may mga criteria pa tayo kung bata pa ba or yung matured na, example sa leaves, matured leaves na ba or yung batang leaves pa, or syempre yung mga walang bugs, walang dumi. Ano pa ba yung criteria natin sa plant material natin? Ano pa man yung siniset nila na sa plant material? Aside sa age, sa appearance, sa color, depende pa ha kung ano talaga yung hinahanap ninyo. Yung sa laboratory animals, if ever you are going to use laboratory animals, pwede din yun siyang purposive sampling. Okay? Kasi meron lang tayong specific animals na gagamitin. Example, albino mice, Swiss albino mice, tapos may specific na sex, kung male or female ba, and then may specific pa talaga na weight. So those are examples of criteria class. And those things make it a purposive sampling. Okay? Pero as much as possible in the experimental study, after doing a purposive sampling with our plant material, we have to do random assignment. Okay, kasi if we don't do randomization in our experimental research, we cannot call it a true experimental research design. Okay, now, quota sampling. This is also a non-probability sampling technique which we use oftentimes sa mga infinite populations. Remember, when you say infinite populations, ito yung population na hindi natin nakakount. Wala tayong example, total number. Walang census. So, hindi natin alam kung gaano talaga sila karami, no? So, ang ginagawa natin, nagkukota, sampling na lang tayo. This is where we set a specific number and then we'll just do the investigation or we'll just do the survey until we reach the target number. That's quota sampling. Okay? Example, hindi mo talaga alam kung gaano karami ang bata sa isang area. Kahit anong gawin mo, wala talagang data kung ilan sila. So yun, magsiset ka na lang. Like you're going to do your research to 20 children. Ganon. That's quota sampling. And then we have sampling for special population frames. Example, yung chronically ill. Siyempre, yung hindi na makasulat, hindi makabasa, bedridden. And then, yung mga bata natin also are included here. Yung mga people, persons with disability. For example, yung may mga autism, yung may mga Down syndrome. We consider them na special population frames. And sa kasi natin, hindi sila makakabigay ng sariling consent. So kapag subject natin sila for our research, we really have to secure informed consent and at the same time permission from their guardians. Okay? Legal guardians. Okay? So that's it for the sampling technique. I hope na as early as now, you have identified already the sampling technique that you are going to use in your research. Kasi dyan mostly magko-concentrate yung ating panelists. Okay? Research design, and then sampling technique, and syempre your data gathering procedure. Okay? So we have here the research instruments. And after after sampling technique, the next subsection for the methodology is the research instrument. I hope during the defense na kuha niyo talaga ito kasi tinuro ko na sa inyo. Ko lang alam kung nakikinig kayo dyan. Pero tinuro ko na kay basi pag abot sa proposal defense, nag-rumble-rumble inyong papel. Okay? So again, after the sampling technique, you have the research instruments. For our research instruments, you may use questionnaires, syempre, no? Wherein, this is the paper and pencil data gathering procedure. But nowadays, syempre, we can use the technology. We can use like softwares or like applications like Google Form to do the collection of the data. Pero that is still considered a questionnaire, ha? Okay? So, we have here criteria of a good questionnaire. But before that, meron tayong like 3 types of questionnaires. lang ha. Sulat ko na lang siya. We have adopted questionnaire. Ito yung, pag sinabing adopted class, ito yung kinuha mo lang siya sa existing na questionnaire and you have to ask permission from the original author ha. Pero when you say kinuha mo siya, kinopya mo talaga siya. Lahat ng questions doon, kinopya mo, wala kang binago, wala kang inumit, wala kang dinagdag, as is. Okay? From an existing study. So we call that adapted. Now, if you call it adapted, ito yung kinopya mo siya pero you make changes. Okay? Pwede kang pwede kang nag-omit ng isang question kasi you think it's not applicable in your study, or pwede kang nagdagdag. Okay? Nagdagdag ka ng another question which you think is relevant in your research. Okay? Or may ni-rephrase ka or may binago ka. Okay? But if yung changes na binago mo is only on the demographic profile, like nagdagdag ka lang ng sex, nagdagdag ka lang ng age, hindi yun siya kasali. Adapted questionnaire with an O pa rin yun siya. Demographic profile is not included here. Doon tayo magko-concentrate on the questions talaga, set of questions in the questionnaire. Now, if the questionnaire is your own words, hindi mo talaga siya kinuha from any existing study, pwede mo siyang kinuha sa existing study pero ikaw yung gumawa. Bali yung existing study lang is ginawa mo lang siyang guide pero hindi mo talaga siya kinopya ha. Ginawa mo lang siyang guide. So the questions in your questionnaires are your own words. Ang tawag dyan, researcher made questionnaire. So I don't know if ano yung study niyo actually, but I think if your study is quantitative descriptive, most of you will be doing a researcher-made questionnaire. Okay, it will be your own words, though you may have guides, but nevertheless, since kayo ang gumawa, researcher-made ang tawag dyan. Now, we have criteria for a good questionnaire. Number one, the language must be clear. And at the same time, it is like applicable to your target respondents. So kasi baka English na masyado yung inyong questionnaire and you are using highfalutin words, hindi na naintindihan ng inyong respondents. So paano niya yon sasagutan? Okay? So you may do or you may make an English questionnaire, but you may also include a translation, a Tagalog translation or a Bisaya translation, para it will be clear to your target respondents. Okay? And then the content of the question and the period involved must be specific. Okay? Specific class in terms sa objectives ninyo. Okay? Kaya meron ding show singleness or purpose. So magre-revolve around kayo sa objectives ng inyong study and yung SOP. Walay masagol din ha na walay appeal. Okay? So the question must be free from assumption and at the same time suggestion. So you don't assume ha, example, your respondents are really like this. You don't assume that one or they really want this thing. Yeah, gibutang ninyo siya sa inyong questionnaire. Hindi ganon. And you don't suggest to them also. Okay, and then this should have the questionnaire should have linguistic completeness and grammatical consistency. So even if you make a Filipino or Tagalog questionnaire or Bisaya questionnaire, it has to be clear and at the same time, please observe correct grammar. Okay, now we also have kinds of questions that we can use in our questionnaire. We have open-ended questions wherein the questions are answered by the respondents in their own words and in their own way. Okay? But if you choose to use or make a close-ended question in your questionnaire, syempre, Ito yung ikaw yung nagsusupply ng answer and that the respondents will just simply check or encircle their answer. And ito yung mostly nakikita natin in our questionnaire. The close and then ones. So example, using the Likert scale. So ito yung mostly din na sinasagutan natin na questionnaire, no? Wherein you have numbers, but these numbers are actually representative for verbal descriptions or interpretations. Like you give a sentence in your questionnaire and then the respondents will just answer whether they strongly agree, not sure, or strongly disagree, just by encircling the corresponding numbers. Okay, so again, we call this the Likert scale. Okay, questions or clarifications about this one? So you have to be clear, ha? Under this section, sa research instrument, you are going to use questionnaire. Please write questionnaire in your paper, and then you have to provide description of your questionnaire also. I'll show you an example later. Okay? Now, validation of our questionnaire. Sa validation class, kasi this is done if your questionnaire is adapted with an A, meaning you make changes from the existing or original ones, and most especially we do this if the questionnaire is researcher made. It has to be validated. So example, you do unsophisticated floating validation wherein you get a group of 20 or more people, you let them answer your questionnaires, and then after answering, you solicit suggestions or recommendations from them on how you can improve your questionnaire. That's unsophisticated floating. But for very serious research, no, they really do factorial analysis wherein they really use statistical tools to determine how they are going to group the questions together in their questionnaire. That is to improve class their results also sa analysis nila sa statistical data. But what we are doing in the school for the validation is yung requirement ninyo is to ask at least three. The minimum is three people na we call them masters in your field. Okay? So syempre, the minimum requirement is meron silang master's degree. Okay? So like they are experts in your field. And then we ask them to look at your questionnaire, check your questionnaires, or even answer your questionnaires, and solicit also recommendations from them. Okay? Tatlo lang yung hinahanap natin, nire-require natin sa school. Okay? So you have to include that one also in your paper. If your research questionnaire is researcher made, kailangan isulat nyo talaga doon na after making the questionnaire, you will have it validated by experts. Okay? Sige. Now, if you will not be using research questionnaire, then you may do interview, but under the research instrument section, you will be writing there the interview guide as your instrument. Meron tayong interview guide. So meron tayong different types of interview. We have the structured interview wherein you will really utilize your interview guide. Your interview guide is actually a list of questions that you are going to ask sa participant ng study mo. Okay? Pero when you say structured, you will really follow the questions in the interview guide. As in verbatim, kung ano ang nakasulat doon, and at the same time, you will follow the exact order doon sa interview guide mo. Kung ito yung question number 1, yan talaga ang una mong itatanong sa participants mo. Verbatim. Again, verbatim. Now, For qualitative research, most of the time they do semi-structured interview. They still have their interview guide. They still follow that. Okay? Pero, I mean, they follow the questions there, no? But it does not need to be in order. And at the same time, they can do follow-up questions. Like if they want to clarify something, they may add questions that are not listed in the interview guide. So you call that semi-structured interview. But if it is an unstructured interview, you don't really have an interview guide. So you ask questions, depende na sa iyo kung anong tatanungin mo. Walang order, walang, hindi talaga siya verbatim, no? That's unstructured interview. Okay? Now, some of you will be doing observation method, especially for experimental studies. You will be observing the results of your experiments, your laboratory animals, your specimens, etc. Okay? Now, how are we going to do that? I'll show you examples, class, ng methodology section ng previous batches, ha? Wait lang. Ay. Okay, let's have the first one. So yung, or may continuation tayo, let's use the same example. Kasi ito na yung pinakita ko sa inyo last time na example for the introduction. So, sa methodology section naman, ayan, nasira lang yung format kasi naka Microsoft Word ito. So you have here the methodology again. Please do not forget to include very short introductory paragraph before the research design. So you have to be specific in your research design. The research design here is quantitative, descriptive, correlational. So as you can see, they have class a description of what quantitative research is, and at the same time, they have also a description of what a descriptive research design is, specifically a correlational study. Now they have here the research local. Their local is General Santos City. And again, they have provided a description of what General Santos is, where is it located, etc. Okay, but again, do not place the map anymore here. Let's have the map in the appendices. Okay. And then, ito yung i-omit na natin in the research, ha? Let's not include the respondents of the study anymore, but let's merge it with the sampling technique. But please do not call it sampling procedure. It's called sampling technique. Okay? So, sa sampling technique, again, you have to first identify who are the subjects or who are the respondents of your study, your sample size, how are you going to get that sample size, and the specific sampling technique that you are going to use. Actually, in this case, they used quota and at the same time purposive sampling, since they have criteria that should be met for their respondents. And at the same time, they just had the quota. Their quota was 520 respondents. So they set actually the numbers here. So, kinuha nila yan until nag-stop na sila sa pagbigay ng kanilang questionnaire when they reached that target. Okay? And again, the next part will be the research instrument. Okay? So, for the research instrument, ang ginagawa nila dito, questionnaire. So questionnaire yung kanilang research instrument class, but do not just write na yung research instrument nyo ay questionnaire. Please also include the description. So just like them, they have here the description. Ano yung description ng questionnaire nila? Na they divided it into two. The first part was about the demographic profile, and then the second part was a Likert scale for anong study nila nito? Fear mongering and fake news, etc. Okay? So nilagay nila dyan na what kind of questions they have included, and that they used a Likert scale for it. But at the end, since this one is a researcher-made questionnaire, they have included that their questionnaires undergone content validation and that they used Google Forms. Since this was during the pandemic, they were not allowed to gather their data personally or on-site. So they just used Google Forms. If you're going to use Google Forms, you have to include that one in your paper also. But please take note, class, kasi ito, final paper na siguro ito. So yung kanilang methodology nasa past tense na. Pero kayo, since you are not yet done with your research, then I'm expecting na future tenses lahat ng verbs na gagamitin ninyo sa paper ninyo. Baka pagdating sa defense natin, akuratan na lang tayo naka-past tense na tanan inyuhang papel na wala pa mo nakasugod. Okay? Sige. So, actually, after the research instruments will be the data gathering procedure. This is not included in my slide anymore because iba-iba kayo ng data gathering procedure. Okay? Ito na yung research proper talaga. Step-by-step method on how you are going to collect the data of your research. If your study is experimental, then it will be the step-by-step experimental procedure, okay, na gagawin niyo sa laboratory. You may also include a summary though, like a schematic diagram, but this one is optional. Okay? Sige. So after that will be the data analysis, but I'll give you a review. If I still have time, I'll give you a review sa statistics and how you are going to do data analysis if your research class is quantitative. Kasi it's a different story if your study is qualitative. And then last, yung ethical consideration. But I'll also discuss the ethical considerations. But I hope you will really follow the arrangement of the subsections in the methodology. Okay, let's have another paper. Kasi yun siya is a quantitative descriptive paper. Now let's have an experimental one. I just don't know if this is the final paper though, but I hope it is. This one is an experimental study. Blood sugar lowering activity. Okay, let's see how they did their methodology section for your reference. Okay, so this is their methodology section. Again, just like the the previous example, they also have their short introductory paragraph, and then they have their research design. I think this is not the final paper since their research design is very short. I think kulang ito ng description on what quantitative experimental research is specifically, but they have actually specified that it is a pre- and post-test control group research design. But yeah, they still have their research local, but they have a lot of research local here. Bakit marami? Kasi number one, they have the research local on where they are going to conduct their research. And then number two, kung saan nila kinuha yung kanilang plant material. I hope that's clear. And then they have also included just like a schematic diagram for their research methodology. And then they have their sampling technique. Okay? Ano ginamit nila dito? Simple random sampling. Okay, they did simple random sampling. But please check this one. The research instruments. Hindi siya kagaya class ng research instrument kanina for a descriptive study. Yung sa questionnaire, tapos nagbigay ng description ng questionnaire. Dito sa research instruments, ito yung, kasi this is experimental ha. If your study is experimental research, you have to enumerate all the laboratory apparatuses, all the laboratory machines or equipment that you are going to use in your research. But aside from identifying them, you also have to include a description on how you're going to use them in your research. So this is actually an operational definition. Itong mga used as yan to measure blood glucose level versus whistle dynamize. Parang operational definition siya. Kasi pag sinabing operational definition, ano yan, how these terms or actually this apparatus is used in the study. So iba ha, and ito yung data gathering procedure nila. And ito yung actually tama na format. Okay? Ito yung tama na format sa data gathering procedure wherein you're going to separate the procedures by step, starting with the permission. Kasi ma-experimental man yan, ma-descriptive research or qualitative research man yan, you have to ask permission first. Especially sa dean, if you are going to conduct your research inside the school and outside the school as well. And then, kung experimental ang research ninyo, may hihingan pa kayo ng permission like yung laboratory in charge natin sa school and so on. Okay? So you have to secure these things first. And then, the second part will be preparation of your materials. Okay, preparation of your materials. It will be a description, step-by-step procedure, I mean, on how you're going to prepare your materials, especially for experimental studies. But for descriptive studies or qualitative studies, you may include here your procedure and how you are going to prepare your questionnaires or your interview guide, including the validation. Okay, and then after that will be the bioassay or yung study proper na talaga. Kasi ito like formulation of tea and etc. Ano na ito, bioassay na ito. Okay? Now, if your study is an experimental study, you have to include citation ha, kung saan nyo kinuha yung specific na experimental procedure na yan. Kasi we don't make our own procedure in doing things in the laboratory. Okay? And then again, data analysis or statistical analysis to be specific. I'll teach you this also. And then the ethical considerations sa baba. Okay, ito yung pagpasulat. Okay, questions so far? Or clarifications? Haba-haba talaga itong methodology section. May gusto kayong itanong or i-clarify. Wala. Teka. Wala. So this one is the general criteria for research tool. Again, sabi ko kanina ha, if you're going to use a questionnaire or an interview guide, you have to do validation. Okay, you have to consider that your questionnaire na ginawa ninyo is valid and it can really accomplish what you need to accomplish. It can really help you obtain the data that you really need. Okay, this is the most important characteristic for a research tool. It has to be valid. Okay, so we have three kinds of validity. So the first one is face validity, wherein two or three supposed experts are going to look at the items sa paper ninyo. Pero mostly face validity is more on the format, okay? The formatting of your questionnaire that includes your like the language that you use, merong grammatical error, the format of the question. Mostly ganun yung tinitingnan sa face validity kasi. So this is actually the weakest. Okay, so what we are doing is actually content validity, wherein experts also do evaluation on the content of your paper if it can really measure what intends to measure. Okay, so it's deeper and it's more sophisticated compared to the face validity kasi the experts will not just look at the format of your questions or your questionnaire, but they will really dig into the content. Okay? Kung tama ba yung pinagsusulat niyo dyan na question and ma-achieve niyo ba talaga yung objective ng inyong study. And another type of validity testing is called construct validity. Okay? Wherein mini-measure talaga yung degree to which your instrument can measure the theoretical construct or trait or kung ano talaga yung mini-measure niya, but we are going to use statistical tests here to really have a conclusion whether tama talaga yung questions ninyo or hindi. So, ma-detect talaga yung differences, yung changes, yung correlations between the items in your questionnaires. So again, gagamit ito ng statistical testing. Yung sa school, yung requirement lang natin is content validity. Okay, so the experts will just have recommendations and how you are going to improve if ever kailangan ng improvement yung questionnaire ninyo, especially on the content. But we will not really measure it using statistical tools. Okay? And at the same time, class, aside sa validity, we also ensure that our research instruments are reliable. So when you say reliable, this will actually papakita nito pag sinabing yung questionnaire mo is reliable kung pina-repeat mo. Example, meron kang respondent, pina-answer mo sa questionnaire mo. And then, pina-repeat mo siya, pina-answeran mo ulit sa kanya yung questionnaire. The result will still be the same. Okay, you will get the same result. So meaning sa reliability, what we are getting here is the degree of consistency of our questionnaire to elicit the same results. Okay? Even if pinapaulit natin yung pagsasagot. So we have, this is the last slide, estimates of reliability. Anong ginagawa nila sa pag-check kung reliable ba talaga ang iyong questionnaire or hindi? Pwede itong test and retest reliability, wherein you are going to hire or select and ask people to answer your questionnaire. Tapos after some time, nagre-test kayo, pinaulit mo silang sumagot doon sa questionnaire mo. And then if it gives the same result, then your questionnaire may be reliable. Okay. And then equivalent form reliability is like checking. Meron kang questionnaire, pinasagutan mo siya sa respondents mo, selected few, and then at the same time, meron kang another questionnaire which you think is equivalent, like almost the same with your questionnaire. Tapos, i-compare natin yung results ng dalawa. If the results are like the same or almost the same, then we can consider your questionnaire reliable, especially if the other questionnaire is already proven and it's already used in practice. And then split half reliability is hahatiin natin yung iyong questionnaire ha. Igugrupo natin. One group yung mga questions na almost magkakapareho doon sa questionnaire mo and another group doon sa another, ano na naman, magkakapareho na naman sila. So split half and then we'll let selected few respondents to answer your questionnaire again, and then we are going to compare the result of the first half and the second half. If you get almost the same result, then that's it. Your sample will be reliable, or your questionnaire, I mean. And then reliability based on item statistics. Ito talaga pinapasagutan yung ano no, questionnaire. Maraming sasagot, example 30 kabuo na selected respondents, sasagot sila sa questionnaire mo. And then using statistical tool, example Cronbach's Alpha, I'll teach you how to do that also. I-check kung per item talaga yun, per item, i-check kung tama ba yung questionnaire, ay yung question na ito, and then reliable siya kasi magkakapare-pareho yung sagot ng iyong mga respondents. Okay? So per item siya, pareha sila lahat ng sagot, so most likely reliable siya. Kasi yung papasagutin mo, ano mo naman yun, target respondent mo naman yun sila. So meaning, they share the same characteristics sa so expect ka na pare-parehas sila ng sagot. Okay? So yun yung mga pwedeng gawin just to ensure that your questionnaire or your interview guide is reliable. So dalawa talaga yan ha, validity and reliability. So that ends this slide. Do you have questions? We will have a separate discussion on the ethical consideration, which is the very last part of the methodology section. And we will also syempre a separate discussion on the data analysis. Kasi marami masyado yung sa data analysis, no? If your study is quantitative in nature, then we have to discuss statistics. If your research is qualitative, especially phenomenological research, the data analysis is also different. So different steps din yun. Syempre, it will not use statistics kasi you don't have numerical data. And then after that, we will be discussing APA format. I don't really discuss APA format from the start kasi I need you to finish your paper first and then let us adjust the format after. Hindi tayo yung nagsusulat tapos sige lang tag-adjust sa atuang format. Pag ma-finalize na itong paper, i-adjust natin yung format after. Okay, kasi konting bagay lang naman yung format sa research paper. Technicalities lang yan siya. So yun yung mga natitirang discussion natin, the APA format and the remaining ethical consideration and data analysis. And actually, I'll insert discussion on the preliminaries also kasi the panelists will also look into that. When I say preliminaries, that includes the title page, ano yung format ng title page natin, yung table of contents, and so on. And also yung mga appendices, yung preliminaries yung first part of the paper before you'll start with the introduction. Well, yung sa last part na that includes the appendices and your curriculum vitae. So you have to prepare that also. Okay, for the meantime, that ends our discussion this morning. Do you have questions or clarifications sa paper ninyo? Baka meron kayong gustong itanong. Let us pause there.